Africantales by Bebe.
Part 2. Jane became visibly restless. She patted her hair, she adjusted her blouse, she took a deep breath and let it out. The men watched her at intervals. Kenny's face was now a mask of fury. If Nwadibia arrives here, it will be worse for the Persono. Let me say it again, he said heavily. Kenny, can I talk to you privately? Jane said in a trembling voice. What do you want to tell me? Kenny looked at her with serious eyes. Let her say whatever it is in front of everyone, Ifeko said without batting an eyelid. Cristabel just smiled within herself. The truth is about to come out, she thought. Yes, say it here, Kenny told her. We're listening. Jane was silent. She looked at Cristabel and Ifeko, then back at Kenny. I stole the money, she blurted, falling on her knees, begging Kenny. What? Kenny yelled, shocked. He sprang to his feet. From his reaction, he was truly shocked at her confession. He had obviously thought it was Cristabel. Cristabel looked at Ifeko, and Ifeko looked at her. She inclined her head sideways and clicked her tongue. I told you I didn't steal the money. Ifeko patted her shoulder happily. Good. Good. He let out a deep sigh of relief. Bring the money out, Kenny barked at Jane. Jane got to her feet and lifted her blouse. She dipped her hand into her jeans and pulled out the small bundles of money. Aha! Aha! Cristabel exclaimed, clapping her hands dramatically. Thank God the truth has come out. But she was telling me to bring out the money, acting like an angel. Jane was filled with shame. She couldn't lift her face to look at any of them. It's a shame, Kenny spat. I gave you 200,000 in the morning, yet it wasn't enough for you. Greed. Shame on you, he told her, snatching the money from her. Kenny began to call his sister on the phone. He told her one of the women had confessed and brought out the money. He told her to tell Nwadibia not to come anymore. You for run mad now, you would have blamed yourself, Kenny told Jane in anger. Oh yeah, start going. Quick, go, he told her, snapping his fingers. Jane quickly picked up her handbag and left the living room, heading towards the exit. Kenny looked highly disappointed. Then he turned to Cristabel with apologetic eyes. I'm sorry I suspected you, Cristabel, Kenny said. She shrugged. It's all right. I'm glad the truth surfaced. I guess she has spoilt the day for us. Cristabel sighed. Well, it's her loss, Kenny said. Ifeko got to his feet, looking at Cristabel. We'll be leaving now. Cristabel got up too, feeling relieved. Arbeg, put CCTV in your house. It's important, she told Kenny. An innocent person should not be accused. Yeah, I'll look into it, Kenny agreed. Ifeko and Kenny shook hands and agreed to meet later. That was how that outing went. Ifeko took Cristabel to his own house, and after everything he gave her a good amount of money, telling her he was glad she was not a thief. Cristabel saw Ifeko 3 more times before he travelled out of the country on business. Cristabel continued her new business and she was really getting money. To tell the truth, she quit her sales girl job and went full-time into Ashawo business. Yes, she became a full-time sex worker. This job had so many risks involved. Every day, many girls went missing, many were unaccounted for. They fell victim to evil men who used them for money rituals. Though Cristabel heard these things, she still didn't want to quit. She thought she had found a new source of income. She joined them in going to some politicians' secret parties. They were filled with orgies. Each day she returned to her house, she felt the burden on her shoulders increase. Was it easy? It was not. She can tell you that. One evening, a man in his mid-50s approached Cristabel at a bar where she was drinking alone. Fine girl, he addressed her as he sat down opposite her. Cristabel smiled and looked the man up. He wasn't bad looking. She smiled back at him. Can I buy you suya? You can't be drinking only that malt. Won't you take beer? Cristabel shook her head. No, I don't drink alcohol. Oh, the man said in surprise. Okay, let me order suya for the 2 of us, he said, looking at one of the waitresses. Suya is a delicacy in Nigeria, a special type of barbecued meat prepared with enough pepper, dried groundnut chaff, and garnished with lots of onions. Though she was in the prostitution industry, Cristabel had promised herself not to take to alcohol. She wanted to be herself at every given time, not to be influenced by alcohol for whatever reason. The man ordered the waitress to get them 2 wraps of suya. Soon Cristabel was enjoying suya with the man. "I'm Ugonna, by the way," he told her as his eyes roamed all over Cristabel. Cristabel smiled back as she picked a sizable chunk of the suya with a toothpick. "I'm Cristabel," she told him, putting the meat slowly into her mouth. "Oh, that's a nice name," Ugonna said with a nod. "I've seen you here twice," he added. "Really?" Cristabel looked at him with mild surprise. "Yeah, baby. I really want to spend the night with you," Ugonna said, gulping his beer. Cristabel shrugged and smiled slowly. "It's your call," she said simply. "Your money will speak for you." Ugonna laughed, feeling good. Later, Cristabel and Ugonna had an agreement on the payment. Then they proceeded to a room paid for by Ugonna. They had a hell of a night. The next morning, Cristabel and Ugonna were walking down the stairs to the reception when a woman at the foot of the stairs began to shout at them. "So this is your business trip, Ugonna? This is where your business meeting is taking place," the woman shouted, her eyes flashing red light. Cristabel shrank back and shook her head. This family drama. I don't like it at all," she murmured, turning around to run away. Kamsi, what are you doing here?" Ugonna shouted at his wife. As Cristabel wanted to escape, Ugonna's wife grabbed her blouse. Akwuna, I will teach you a lesson today. Next time if you see a married man, you'll run away," the woman breathed. "Madam, leave me alone, Biko," Cristabel cried, trying to free herself from the woman's grip. The woman held on to her, and before Cristabel could know what was happening, several slaps had landed on her face, front and back. The woman was giving her the beating of her life. A female staff hurried towards them. "What is happening here?" the staff yelled. Kamsi, Ugonna yelled and yanked his wife back. "You're crazy," Cristabel yelled at Kamsi, Ugonna's wife, and made her escape with that single opportunity. Her clothes were torn. She didn't stop to trade words with the woman. Inside the hotel premises, a taxi was parked. She ran to the taxi and hopped in. The driver was surprised to see her clothes in shreds. "What happened?" the driver asked in surprise. "Just take me to Amako here. One crazy woman wanted to strip me naked," Cristabel said with tight lips, her eyes filled with anger. The driver shook his head and started the vehicle. He drove out of the hotel premises immediately. Cristabel was thankful that only a few persons at the hotel lounge had witnessed the fracas. Luckily, nobody videoed it, else she would have seen herself on social media in the next few hours. "God forbid," she muttered, trying to calm her frazzled nerves. Throughout that day, Cristabel stayed indoors. She had tried to take a long rest and take her mind off the morning incident. "If I had hit back at her, my own blows could have resulted in something else. That's why I didn't hit back," she muttered as she put on her television to watch a series. "If this happens again, I don't think I will allow myself to be beaten like that again," she thought with pursed lips. Is it my fault that her husband is not satisfied with her? Imagine trailing him to the hotel. Anyway, let me see another woman who will attack me like that again. I'll fight back, she muttered. 1 year after leaving Udoka's house, Cristabel met her at the Erkahonua main market one afternoon. They greeted each other cheerfully. "Cristabel, are you still in that dirty business?" Udoka asked her pointedly. Cristabel flung her braids back. "What dirty business?" she asked innocently. "Cristabel, are you aware that everything we do has a spiritual implication?" Udoka stared at her. "Which spiritual implication?" Cristabel stared back at her. "I beg, I'm trying to survive." She pursed her lips. "You're trying to survive? That's a lame excuse. Do you know that each time you sleep with a man you're affected by his aura? By his radiation? All those men you sleep with? Do you know what type of human beings they are? How is that my business? Cristabel asked nonchalantly. It will be your business one day. Cristabel, by sleeping with all these men, you're lowering your body vibration every day, and this may bring you a lot of problems, Udoka told her, shaking her head. Cristabel snapped her fingers in rejection. God forbid. Not for me, she said with emphasis. Udoka shook her head. It's not enough to say God forbid. You're the one to forbid it, she told her. I'm going. Don't say nobody told you. Bye-bye. Cristabel told her pointedly and turned away. Udoka shook her head and walked off. Back at home, Udoka's words rang bells in her mind, but at a point Cristabel banished them. I need to make more money, Yare. I need to be sending money back home. We can't drift back to poverty, she said, shaking her head emphatically. Cristabel became more cautious as she went out with men. She warned them that she didn't want any surprise attack from their wives. She always asked them if they were sure their wives wouldn't pounce on her. The men laughed and assured her she was safe. One evening, Cristabel got a customer who wanted to stay overnight with her. From all indications, he was married. All these married men trying to stay overnight usually cause trouble, she thought, pressing her finger on her lips. Won't your wife trace you to the hotel if you stay overnight? She asked him with doubt. Nothing like that, the man who had introduced himself as a farm said, clicking his tongue. I don't want trouble. Overnight can bring its own challenges, Cristabel said. I'm telling you there will be no problem, Afam assured her. Do according to your strength, Oga. The way I'm looking at you, you look stressed up. Then make me relax, Afam told her, smiling. That is what I want from you. Cristabel looked at him and smiled. Okay, deal. Let's talk price. After their agreement on the price, Afam and Cristabel headed for a hotel room. After the first round, Afam told Cristabel that he was not satisfied, that she was too good at her job. Smiling, Cristabel agreed to a second round after all. He had paid handsomely for all night work. No problem, I'm equal to the task, she told him, reaching for him. After the second round, Afam said he wanted another round. This got Cristabel worried a bit. Oga, I beg, rest. This is just 10 minutes after the second round and you want to do again. Don't you know you may collapse? She frowned at him. Are you not strong? Are you afraid of what I'm doing to you? Afam asked, reaching for her again. Look, I have no problem. If you want more, I can handle it. But you're not looking equal to it. Rest, I beg. Toatu ide gidigbam, he told her, laughing shortly. After more persuasion, Cristabel allowed Afam a third round. While they had advanced and reached a high tempo, she felt Afam start to convulse heavily. Oga, wetinde do you? Cristabel asked in fear. Ah! Afam groaned as he continued to convulse on top of her. Oga, what's wrong? Cristabel tried to steady him. Ah! Afam finally slumped. Oga! Cristabel screamed. She pushed him aside and drew herself forcefully away, her heart in her mouth. The man looked lifeless. Cristabel touched him, shaking his shoulder in shock. Oga! She called in a broken voice. The man was unresponsive. Cristabel screamed and hurriedly put on her clothes. She felt the man's pulse. She couldn't feel anything. She ran out of the room, heading to the reception. A voice within her told her to quietly leave the hotel. Even if CCTV captured her, she could run away from the town. No, she whimpered at that thought, running to the lady at the reception. Help! The man I was with is unconscious. He just collapsed, I told him. I told this man to stop, but he won't listen, Cristabel sobbed, flinging her hands in the air. What are you saying? The receptionist asked, shooting to her feet. Cristabel repeated herself, shaking visibly. The receptionist hit the phone on her desk, and soon 2 men and a woman from management came hurrying to the reception. Cristabel led them to the bedroom. One of the men checked Afam's pulse and shook his head. I don't think this man is still alive, he said. Ew, Cristabel exclaimed, crying. What am I going to do? What did you say really happened? The woman asked her pointedly. With tears in her eyes, Cristabel narrated the sequence of the events. We'll have to call the police, one of the men said, glancing at Cristabel. I told him to stop. I told him to stop, but he didn't listen. Cristabel whimpered loudly, hugging herself tightly. Soon, the man made a call to the nearest police station, and everyone stood still waiting for them to arrive. Cristabel continued to weep, flinging her hands in the air. Will you shut up? When you saw that he was weak, why didn't you insist on stopping? One of the men shouted at her. Now you're crying crocodile tears. This is how you people bring bad names to a hotel. Cristabel was almost dead. Her heart was now pounding slowly and painfully. Who will she call now? This is not a small problem at all. Her eyes darted here and there. What if she runs away now? She looked at the men. They will catch her, she thought with a sigh. She should have escaped quietly from the very beginning. But she couldn't leave the man just like that. Just then, a doctor arrived at the scene and checked Afam up. He shook his head and confirmed him dead. That was when Cristabel began to wail. Ew! God! Ew! From the moment the management entered the room, one of the men started videoing the whole situation. Cristabel fell on the ground and cried, pulling her hair. Chai, I don't enter one chance, oh! Shortly after the doctor made his pronouncement, 2 policemen arrived at the scene. After accessing the situation, Cristabel was handcuffed and taken away. From that day, Cristabel understood that this life can truly be zigzag. The news spread to the whole city, and her street neighbors knew what happened. To come out of this sort of problem was not easy at all. Afam's wife and relatives came to the police station and saw her in the cell where she was remanded. They requested for her to be brought out. Trembling in fear, Cristabel refused to go out, but she was forced to go out and meet the wife of the man who had died on top of her. Afam's wife pounced on her and beat the hell out of her. Idiot! I'll make sure you rot in jail, the woman blasted, hitting Cristabel up and down. Eventually, one of the policemen on duty dragged Afam's wife back and scolded her for going physical on Cristabel. The court will take care of the problem. Once you press charges, she will be tried in the court, the policeman told her. You'll rot in jail, Afam's wife spat at her. Ashawo Kobo. Cristabel didn't fight back. She was really down. What could she tell the woman? She was grieving. She wouldn't want to hear the truth. She would want to heap all the blame on her. In the cell, Cristabel had gone through a lot of trauma. Her greatest shame and distress was when her mother came to visit her. Her mother wept and asked her to tell her what exactly happened. Cristabel narrated the incident and told her that her lawyer was working tirelessly to get her out. She begged her mother not to be broken by what she had seen or heard, that she would come out soon. Cristabel's mother had to stay back in Owerri with one of her children so as to support Cristabel. Her mother was truly broken. The whole thing came as a shock to her. She didn't know her daughter was into prostitution in the city. She had to be strong, but then she wept terribly in the night, her heart completely shattered, to think her daughter was selling her body so they could eat and live well. 3 months later, Cristabel was acquitted from the murder case against her. In fact, her lawyer, Mr. Oko, was very good and did his best to help her. All the money she had made in her hustle was spent on the case. The day she was acquitted, her family wept with great relief and hugged her dearly. Cristabel wept with relief and thanked God for saving her from imprisonment. Cristabel refused to go home to the village with her mother and siblings. She assured them she would recover from the setback and from the trauma. She had emaciated during the turmoil and was the shadow of her former self. Cristabel had only a handful of friends, but during her ordeal only one, Ifeoma, stood by her. The rest of her 3 friends had abandoned her. It was Ifeoma who supported her after her acquittal, both financially and otherwise. Ifeoma brought her foodstuffs and gave her some money to keep her going. Cristabel was ever thankful to her. Though the gossip mill in her vicinity was in full swing over her case, Cristabel pretended not to notice people's whispers when she passed. Is that not the girl who went to jail because a man died on top of her? Look at that Ashawo I was telling you about. That girl no get shame at all. A man died on top of her in a hotel room and she get Monday parade this street like nothing happened. Cristabel gave deaf ears to their gossip. She kept her face straight and promised herself to bounce back. Should I hang myself because of what happened? People Seth, she thought. 2 months passed without much incident. Cristabel was not thinking of finding a job. She was still thinking of going back to her street work. She decided to raise some money through her Akwuna business, and from there, open a big shop for herself. She had realized the dangers of prostitution could be overwhelming, but she was willing to take the last risk to be able to set up a big shop for herself. Slowly, she returned to the dark world of prostitution. This time, she carried a high blood pressure kit with her. She gave it as a condition. Before she slept with any man, she checked his blood pressure level. If she felt he wasn't in the green zone, she backed out. She couldn't afford another disaster on her head. She became popular because of the blood pressure kit she carried, and more men wanted to have a taste of her. Then, one day, Cristabel went out with a man called Elua. He promised to give her a huge amount of money. Her mind told her to be on red alert. She wanted to reject the offer, but greed didn't allow it. Cristabel agreed. Cristabel accepted Elua's offer. She usually wore female contraceptives. She made sure she was completely prepared. Unless something beyond her happened, she was prepared. Cristabel told him to use protection, but he refused. Elua said he wanted it raw. Cristabel conceded, knowing that she herself was prepared for it. She stayed with Elua for 2 hours in a hotel room. She was present as he paid for it. Afterwards, Elua left. Cristabel was feeling quite uncomfortable. She rushed to the bathroom and pulled out the contraceptive. Cristabel staggered back, her vision blurring. She held her forehead, holding on to a railing. Then her gaze began to clear slowly. She stared at the contraceptive she had thrown into the sink. The sperm in the contraceptive was filled with maggots. Cristabel tried to scream, but no sound could come out from her lungs. She began to pant heavily. This man wanted to use voodoo on me. She stared into thin air, her heart pounding slowly. She fell on her knees, dazed. She had heard of such stories, but she never really believed them. That was a kind of voodoo, whereby the woman injected with such sperm will eventually have health problems, and spiritually, her light would be taken from her. It usually resulted in her death. Cristabel burst into tears, lying on the floor of the bathroom, her sobs racking her whole body. After some minutes, she gathered herself together, but she was still struggling to breathe. She slowly got to her feet, dragging in each breath. With her hands trembling, she flushed the maggots down the drain and threw the contraceptive into the bin. She staggered back to the room. Cristabel didn't waste further time in the room. She checked out soon after. When she reached her house, she fell to the ground and continued to weep. God, what did I get myself into? What? God, please forgive me. Forgive me, she sobbed, rolling on the floor. After my brush with imprisonment, I continued. God-y. Forgive me. Chai. This is how this man wanted to destroy me finally. Cristabel there and then decided to quit selling her body for money. She felt completely revulsed by the whole prostitution of a thing. The next day she ran to a church, and during prayers, she prayed to God to forgive her and grant her a new beginning. She was ready to start a new life. The priest prayed for her and told her she had a lot of spiritual entanglements on her neck. Special prayers were made for her. The priest told her the first step after repentance was to not go back to the old sin. That would determine a lot in her life. Wondering what to do with the money in her account, Cristabel decided to give 1/3 of it to 3 orphanages in her state. She bought food items and provisions and donated them to the orphanages. She felt better. 1 month later, Cristabel took the decision not to continue languishing in regret and in the past. The future awaited her. It was in her power to make that future a great reality. She began to learn fashion and got her own sewing machine. For the next 6 months, she learnt the skill of fashion and design and improved her sewing and design abilities. Cristabel learnt how to sew men's boxers and singlets. She researched online and studied unique designs and was inspired to do more. The market for these products was promising. Cristabel became more serious in her fashion skill. She went to ABBA and got unique materials and sewed lots of male boxers and singlets, making sure her brand had quality. It was not an easy journey, but she was determined to be useful to herself and to the society. She found several shops that were willing to sell her products. She also displayed them in her own shop, making it easier to make sales. Within 2 years, Cristabel's brand, Christie, was well known in the state, and many sellers booked for her boxers and singlets. Cristabel even hired 3 workers to assist her in the production, and she bought more equipment to facilitate her work. Today, Cristabel has put her life back on the right track and would always remain thankful to God for not letting her fall victim to the evils of her past profession. She had stayed away from men and focused on developing herself. She also did her best to persuade other women from continuing in that ugly profession. In fact, Cristabel had so far rescued 3 women from prostitution, giving them money to start a business. She was really determined to save as many as she could in this life. As for getting married, Cristabel knew that at the right time she would find the man who wouldn't mind her dirty past, but she wasn't putting her mind to it because she knew it would be hard to find. But who knows? I hope you enjoyed this story. Have you heard strange stories like this? Please tell us your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check our other videos. See you there.